सब कहले सेटा भलो हो and मु भाबुचे I think it was a wise decision.
You have literally done political economy.
Actually the प्रतिबाबू देखिले हबो जे हमर नले वन डायमेंशनल हे छि अपन नले खाली संविधान कथा कहबे इकोनॉमिक्स कथा कहबे मु देखि छि अनेक समय रे द ओल्ड टाइमर्स आर वेरी इम्पेशेंट अबाउट गेटिंग इनटू अदर डिसिप्लिन्स किंतु सेटा हबो एबे गोटे इंटरडिसिप्लिनरी अप्रोच न रहले आई थिंक आपनकर मोस्ट ऑफ द एनालिसिस शुड बी flawed or one dimensional अपन you are looking at only one dimension जेमती गोटे रैशनल
बाबा से कहउतले कहले जेते
हां कौन सर
केना हमर जते बेले ये हला हमरा इनफैक्ट उत्कल यूनिवर्सिटी भी देबे प्लानिंग फॉर स्कूल एज अ डिसिप्लिनरी काई के हे परलानी
आ रहा हो क्या आ रहा
इनफैक्ट आपण देखिबे
कहती एकदम के फोन ने कर दो बुझले कि ना इधर टिके स्क्रीन एनेबल कर देंगे मैडम आगे 2 मिनट तो कल वो अच्छा था
हाँ सर कर देली सर एटा हे गला
मैडम देखि पाउछन्ते स्क्रीन टा
आज्ञा ठीक अछि
थैंक यू सिद्धार्थ ये जो है ना these are things we should take them forward
अपन को सर YouTube लिंक ता भी पठे देली
हाँ ठीक है मैडम ठीक है थैंक यू मैडम
What happened? Huh? What happened?
आठो सर आरंभ करिवा
एकदम आई एम रेडी मैडम
ओके सर Good morning to all esteemed participants and good morning to Professor Mishra, our keynote speaker. So today is the second part of our discussion, India's development dilemma and sustainable development goals. So yesterday we had discussed about India's development alternatives, and today we are going to discuss what is India's achievement so far as the SDG goals are concerned. So the Professor Mishra will enlighten us regarding this. So it's actually a privilege to hear you, sir, again and again. So over to Professor Mishra.
Good morning, Professor Tripathi. Good morning to all my distinguished colleagues like Dr. Pradeep Mishra, my dear friends and students. At the outset, let me admit that SDG is not my area of expertise. I have generally worked on development economics quite substantially, but this is an area which interests me, fascinates me the most. So in case you find certain paucity of depth, kindly do overlook it, and I'll be happy to be enlightened about some of the weak areas in which I do not have proper perception. But despite this caveat, I'll try my best to explain this topic. Yesterday, as Professor Tripathi very rightly mentioned, we looked at major 5 ideas and also the development debates and how India has done both in terms of economic progress and human development. These are the 3 things that we did. And I ended my lecture by saying that growth, development, and sustainability are the tripod of any economist's chariot. So starting with the submission that I made, let me first get into the Millennium Development Goals before I get into the Sustainable Development Goals. As all of you know, that the Millennium Development Goals started in 2000 and ended in 2015. And most discerning observers believe that at the end of 2015, India's cup of happiness is actually full, actually half full. You know, somebody says it's half empty. Some people say it's half full. So I'll just quickly go through the major goals which we had in the Millennium Development Goals. The first, of course, has been eradication of extreme hunger and poverty, which also has its salience in the SDG goals that we have, we haven't achieved this target. We should have actually reduced percentage of people below poverty line to about 12%, and it is around 23.7%. So it's twice the number. But we certainly have achieved the second goal, which is achievement of universal primary education, where we have introduced the SSA, and the enrollment percentage has been 97. Almost 97. Even during the COVID, the latest ASEA reports also says that it is around 95 to 96. COVID also hasn't affected enrollment in a very significant manner. But very interesting pointer to this is that the MDG never spoke about quality. If you all remember, Dr. Pradeep, I said there were 3 dimensions to education policy: access, equity, and quality. Access, equity, and excellence. So as far as access is concerned, I think India has done remarkably well in terms of giving access to any child, be he or she from a poor family or a rich family. The third target, which is promotion of gender equality, there also we have achieved, because the MDG only envisaged that there should be no discrimination in entry of boys and girls into schools. It didn't talk of any other gender inequality. If you remember, Dr. Pradeep, I mentioned about GII, Gender Inequality Index, which had a larger scope, MMR, labor force participation, representation in the parliament. So the MDG never talked about that. MDG said that in case you are able to give boys and girls equal opportunity for admission and there is no evidence of discrimination, you have achieved your objective. And I think India has substantially achieved its objective. So both in terms of equity and access, we have done reasonably well. Where we haven't done well, and I keep on dwelling on this like a broken record, is the area of reducing infant mortality rate, where the MDG expected that we'll reduce it by 66%. We have only done 1/3. Even in terms of reducing maternal health, the target was reducing it by 75%, whereas we have again done it by 1/3. I distinctly remember, ma'am, I thought I'll just share with you, when Dr. Manmohan Singh released the 12th plan document, I remember very clearly in 2012. So he said that, while releasing the document, he said, my greatest regret is that as the Prime Minister, I have not been able to reduce the MMR to double digits. It was 172 per 1 lakh. He said, Bantek, I would request you to bring it down to a double digit figure, because most of the developed countries have a single digit figure, less than 10. So please try to bring it down from 172 to less than 100, which a few states have achieved, like Kerala I mentioned yesterday. But by and large, most of these states have slipped this target. So having said all this, let me now go down to the Brundtland report of 1987. This is extremely important, because the Swedish Prime Minister who headed this committee in 1983, they submitted this report in 1987. So it was this committee which very clearly mentioned that there is a clear conflict between economic growth and accelerating ecological degradation. So the committee recognized that every country wants to increase the growth rate, but at the same time, it also noted with a tremendous amount of anguish that there is an acceleration in the ecological degradation. So it was this committee which for the first time defined what sustainable development is all about. And this is a universally acceptable definition, which basically says sustainable development is that development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own. So basically, we should not be very selfish about our generation. We should also ensure that our children, our grandchildren, have the same kind of human development, economic growth that we are also cherishing. So therefore, the Commission also very, very clearly said that there are three important pillars to sustainment. And they were economic growth. Students, if you have a pen and paper, please do note it. Economic growth, environmental protection, and social equity. Very, very interesting. This is the report. And very interestingly, the 17 targets which I am going to now show for the SDG are based on these three pillars. That's the point which I want to say, that when we are talking of sustainable development goals, it is just not reducing carbon emission or improving life underwater. It is a combination of having growth, protecting environment, while ensuring social equality. So this is a very, very important report. I thought, ma'am, I'll flag it for our all reference. We now come to the SDG, which has 17 goals. I'll just quickly like to mention that the 17th goal, which is about partnership, is common to both MDG and SDG. So I'm not getting into the partnership issue, except to flag the importance that the next decade, because SDG is going to end in 2030. So we are today sitting on a year where we have exactly a decade to go for this effective partnership. And also very, very important thing that the SDG is trying to highlight, that it is not the role of the government to achieve SDG. It is the goal of the society. Please remember, MDG flagged the various goals as goals of the government. Today, the goal is not that of a government. It is the whole society. So therefore, there are three pillars to achieving SDG. One is the government, second is the civil society, and third is the private entrepreneurs. Very, very important, because whenever we try to become very critical of the government, we are forgetting the basic premise on which SDG has been mounted, which is to essentially first this partnership. And the document which has been brought out by the Niti Aayog, which is available online, also mentions that we are looking at a decade of partnership. So this has to be very, very clear that we are not looking at a governmental role, but a synergetic role of the government, society, and the private enterprises as enterprise together. So just to categorize, I just mentioned the Commission's report. Now the three objectives can be categorized like this. The economic, there are 8, ma'am, there are 8 economic objectives. Now the 8 economic objectives are no poverty, zero hunger, universal healthcare, quality education. This is where it is different from MDG, drinking water, electricity, decent jobs, innovation and infrastructure. These are the 8 economic objectives. In the social objectives, we are talking of gender equality, reducing inequality. This is very important, reducing income inequality. Now, I want to share with all of you that while a lot of literature is available on income inequality, unfortunately, the MDM, despite a lot of protests by activists, did not include income inequality as one of its targets, reducing income inequality. So the SDG recognized this requirement, and reducing income inequality has become one of the major targets, because the world has noticed that the Gini coefficient, which is how income inequality is measured, is actually increasing. Just to give an example, India's income inequality in 1990 was about 30%. Now it is around 38%. USA, it was around 40%. Now it is around 48%. China, income inequality is also significantly increased. Possibly the only country where income inequality has marginally declined is Germany, Sweden. All the Scandinavian countries have this wonderful record of reducing income inequality, while almost all the countries I look at, the income inequality has actually accentuated. And the last but not the least are the environmental objectives, which is sustainable growth, responsible consumption, climate change, ecosystem, and land system. Having said all that, so this is the difference as I find between MDG and the SDG 2016. So while SDG harped on access, universal access to primary education, we are now talking of quality education. While MDG talked of reducing extreme poverty, we are setting a very, very ambitious target of zero poverty and hunger. It had identified infant mortality and maternal mortality reduction as a major target. We are now getting into universal health care. From gender equity, now we are talking about gender equality. Equity has become equality, where we are looking at labor force participation, a host of other issues. So this is how the difference is. Now, what I intend to do, friends, I intend to give a flavor of how different states are doing in terms of a few major goals. Now, let me first take the first goal, which is no poverty. Now, you see here, Punjab has about 8% people below poverty line, about 8%, which is around 16% in Gujarat. In Kerala, it is around 7%, and in Orissa, it is around 32%. So below poverty line, this is the figure. Below poverty line is essentially $25, 0.15, about 100 rupees per day. But the parameter which interests me more is not just poverty. When we talk of poverty, Garibo Lokota, I don't look at it that way. You know, there are different dimensions to poverty. So in 2016, a very important definition has been brought in, which is called multi-dimensional poverty index. So you are looking at poverty on or different levels. First is education. Second is health. Third is nutrition. Fourth is living standards. And fifth is assets. Students, if you are noting it, it's a very, very important definitional issue that, out of 100 marks, they are giving about 20% weightage to each of these parameters: education, health, nutrition. Living standards will include cooking fuel, water, electricity, pakka house. And in assets, we are looking at both movable and immovable assets. So if you see, there is a difference in the character of poverty when we look for just poverty line and multi-dimensional poverty. In a state like Gujarat, you find while percentage of people below poverty is around 16%, people who are suffering from different dimensions of poverty is about 21%, which essentially means it is just not poverty. It is also deprivation of education, deprivation of health, deprivation of proper nutrition, nutritional standard, and assets. So therefore, poverty is different from multi-dimensional poverty index. In case of Maharashtra, it is almost same. In case of Tamil Nadu, you find a very interesting situation where the percentage of people who are multidimensionally poor is less than people who are just poor. In Punjab also, you find. So therefore, when you look at data in Orissa, you find multidimensional deprivations is more than poverty alone. So therefore, when we discuss about poverty, we need to go beyond just a bland discussion about poverty to the different dimensions of poverty, as I mentioned, the 5 dimensions. So therefore, we need to look at each of these aspects: education, health, nutrition, and just not the poverty line. Whether somebody is getting 40 rupees, 45 rupees, whether somebody is having 2,200 calories. So you have to go beyond calories. This whole concept of measuring poverty only in terms of caloric consumption, that in rural areas it is 2,400, in urban areas it is 2,200. I think we need to abdicate that, and the SDG has done a wonderful job in going beyond calorific calculation to multidimensional understanding of poverty. Am I making myself clear, Karthik? Is that clear? Karthik, if you are there?
Yes, sir, absolutely. Yes.
Sir, it is very good.
Yeah.
Sir, one thing I would like to know from you. This
Yeah,
is Gautam here, sir.
Yeah, go.
One thing I would like to know, sir, regarding that progressive tax system. Is any state, Indian state is also providing, having some different progressive tax system that help them to attain SDG goal or reducing poverty or managing inequality? State-wise, is it?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question. Now, to answer you directly, as far as the direct tax system is concerned, it is controlled by the state, by the center. The states have no role there. It is only in GST. It is only in GST that you have a central GST, you have a state GST. Okay, so you can have differential rates there. I'll have to check up. It's a good question. I'll have to check up whether there are differences in the tax rates for different commodities in the state GST. So I'll have to check up. It's a good question. I'll get back to you on the mail. I'll have to check the data. My own hunch, I would say, is that there is not much of a difference. There's not much of a difference between the states. The very reason that they are not allowing petrol to come into the purview of GST goes to show that all of them are trying for more and more tax collection rather than looking for equity or giving greater relief to the poor persons. But still then, Gautam, I don't want to make a statement which is not backed by facts. I'll have to check up on this. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I come to this second target, which of course bothers me enormously, which is zero hunger. Now, as you see, it's a very depressing data as I make comparisons between different states. Even a state like Punjab, let's forget about only looking at Kerala and Gujarat. Let's look at a state like Punjab, where the per capita income is the highest in the country. Now, the percentage of women who are anemic, both adolescent girls and women up to the age of 49, this is the period when they are fertile. Even in Punjab, it is around 42%. And except for Kerala, where it is around 22%. I think you look at any state. Incidentally, Gujarat presents a far better picture than Maharashtra or Andhra Pradesh or Odisha. So you would see, though 33% is quite high, but percentage of women who are anemic is a real area of concern. Percent of children who are stunted, again, very depressing feedback. Most of the states have even Punjab, why should 24% of children in Punjab be stunted for lack of nutritious food? So I think this is a very serious indictment of our government policy, where Article 47, as I mentioned yesterday, it is the responsibility of the government to ensure that there is an improvement in the nutritional level of its children. I come to quality education. I did mention about this yesterday, but I did mention that a state like Tamil Nadu, for instance, almost 49% are having college education, whereas in case of a state like Gujarat, it is just about 20%. Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, just see here, the gross enrollment ratio of college education is around 50%, which is very high. It compares with almost some of the most developed countries. It's around 20%. Kerala is around 37%. Maharashtra is 32%. Orissa, it is still quite low. And of course, in secondary education, there also we find the record of Gujarat not too edifying. Orissa has a good record there, about 66% in secondary education. So Orissa is doing reasonably well, in an interstate competition, interstate comparison. Whereas I think it needs to catch up on college education. I come to now, these were some of the economic indicators. Now I come to a parameter called decent work and economic growth. Now here you'll find that Gujarat has been doing far better than other states. Like for instance, ease of doing business, it is the leader. Quite clearly, it is the leader. And you compare it with Kerala, despite all its equity ideology, it's as low as 1.1%. People just don't want to invest here. So therefore, it is not an easy place to invest. Maharashtra is very good, 17.5. Tamil Nadu is very good. No wonder it is the automobile hub of India. Punjab is not particularly great. Not even Karnataka, except IT. I think it's not a interesting place to invest. So ease of doing business, how quickly you get your electricity permits, you get your land, you set up your factory. I think Gujarat certainly leads the way. Even in terms of percentage of unemployment, I think Gujarat is doing extremely well. In fact, Kerala has a very dubious record in this. When we discuss Kerala, Gujarat, Punjab, all these states, I think, Karthik, we are not really getting into the nitty-gritty of some of these major issues. There are a lot of videos which are going on why Kerala is ahead of other states. But who is challenging them on these two issues? Why is unemployment so high? Why are the Malayalis going out of the state? If Kerala was such a great God's country, why most of them are going outside? Why people are not interested in investing? Why 10% people are unemployed as against 7% all India? The CMI projection is around 7% people are unemployed. Kerala, it is around 10%. Maharashtra, it is just about 5%. Tamil Nadu, 7%. So quite clearly, Kerala is an outlier. When we talk of education, well, it is an outlier. It's a good outlier. But here also in terms of unemployment, it is certainly an outlier in a negative way. So I think I think public policy, when we talk of public policy, governmental intervention, all this data is just not for passing of state governments. These data have to be looked at very clearly, and specific allocation, specific understanding, partnership must be first to take it forward, to achieve the targets. Do you agree with me? So therefore, in our obsession to look at the macro numbers, let's not overlook these very uncomfortable micro details. I come now to industry and innovation. Industry and innovation. Again, if you see here, manufacturing as percentage of gross value addition. All of you kindly keep a note of this. Manufacturing as percentage of gross value addition. Gujarat, Karthik, can you tell me how much is it in case of Gujarat?
It's around 37%. So
it is more than China, which is 30%. The only country which beats Gujarat in this is Germany, 40%. The manufacturing hubs that we talk of, South Korea, China, Germany, Japan, most of them have a manufacturing share of around 30 to 35%. And if you remember the national manufacturing policy, please keep a note, national manufacturing policy in 2011, madam, which we had, there we said that we'll increase manufacturing share from 16 to 25%, because we believed that if we increase our manufacturing footprint, then employment generation would be better. The two problems. So one is that you increase your percentage of allocation to manufacturing, then your employment percentage also increases. I was part of this national manufacturing policy, which was chaired by Mr. Krishnamurthy, who was the father of Maruti Project, Cell, BHEL, wonderful technocrat. So he used to tell in every minute, every meeting, that please think about employment opportunities. Please skill people. Unless you do that, you have a serious problem in hand. So if you see here, despite all that we can say against Gujarat, they have done exceptionally well in terms of manufacturing. A state like Kerala, it's just about 10%. Maharashtra is around 20%. Tamil Nadu is 20%. So quite clearly in terms of manufacturing and infrastructure, it has taken a real leap forward. Innovation score, very interesting innovation score. You find Karnataka to be the leader, 42%. It is the real leader, IT, innovation. I think Karnataka really leads the way. And Gujarat has considerable distance to cover. Same with Maharashtra, very high innovation, very high innovation percentage. So therefore, when we talk of manufacturing, this was something which Joseph Schumpeter, the great economist, has said. He had coined the concept of destructive creation, creative destruction. And for him, what is most important is innovation. He said, capitalism will survive only when it is creative and it innovates. Normally, ma'am, in economics, we say there are two factors of production: land, labor, and capital. Three factors of production. The first economist who talked about innovation, importance of innovation, was Joseph Schumpeter. And you can clearly see that the SDG takes note of this particular aspect. If people innovate, obviously they would be the front runners in global competition. Now we come to inequality. As I mentioned right in the beginning of my lecture, that very little discussion takes place in international fora, except for wonderful books on inequality by Piketty, by Blackburn. A lot of books are there. But when it comes to hardcore discussion in the public platforms, at least in the UN forum, I haven't seen much of a discussion there. Now, this is a very interesting description of what is the percentage of people who are in the bottom 40%, last two quintals. If we divide income into 5 tiers, so you find in Orissa, close to 64% are in the bottom 40%. You know, when we say Orissa is poor, the fact remains that close to 64% of the people are in the bottom 40%. Whereas the figure is just about 5 in Punjab. You know, when I first joined Delhi, and I had a friend who was from Punjab, Jagdev Bansal. He said, "Tumhari Odisha mein bada garibi hai na?" So I said, "Ha hai, you don't have poverty in Punjab?" He said, "No, we don't have beggars there." So yesterday when I was looking at the figures, now I understood why Bansal used to say that. Just 5% in the bottom 50%. Kerala it is 3%. Gujarat continues to be quite high. Maharashtra is also 26%. All India it is 40%. 40% poor people are in the 40% lowest 2 quartiles. I now come to a very interesting statistics on economy, income inequality. Now you will find very interestingly, inequality in the rural areas. Ma'am, please have a look at this. Very interesting. Karthik, please keep. This is by a wonderful writer, researcher. Her name is Taplova. I would request all students to keep the note. She's a Russian economist, and some of the best works on economic inequality has been done by Taplova. Taplova with John Drays has also worked with her, but Taplova. Now Taplova finds that as far as the rural India is concerned, ma'am, you'll find that between 1993-94 to say now, it has remained around 26 to 27%. The inequality hasn't increased much because the condition in the rural areas, as yesterday I had mentioned about that, where 70% people live, hasn't changed much. When I go to my village, the only change I find are the mobile phones and telephone booths. That's all. But otherwise, you don't find much of a change in the income inequality structure. Whereas that's not the case. That's not the case in the urban landscape where 30% people live. It has jumped up from 32% to 38%. People who are migrating from rural area to urban area in search of work, employment, there also you find that there is an increasing gap between the rich and the poor, because the biggest reason is that many people join as IT professionals, earning very, very good salary, whereas you have a large number of people who are seething, suffering in slums. They are industrial workers, they are informal workers. So the inequality of the urban India has increased. So therefore, when we talk of inequality, we need to take note of these major difference that we find both in the rural and urban India. And very interestingly, I saw this beautiful diagram yesterday. This is the global poverty. This is global inequality. So somebody said that the top 20%, of the world, Karthik, hold the champagne glass and sip 83% of global wealth. Just see this, that reaches 20% have 83% of global wealth, and the poorest 20%, 1.4%. The next 20%, 2%. So which basically means 40% of the world population have 4% of income, which is what Orissa is having. So it's such a cruel irony that we conform to the global figures, and the percentage of people, people like Joseph Stiglitz and all, they keep on writing about this growing inequality, largely because most of the wealth has been purloined by the rich through the market mechanism. You don't have a good, Gautam asked me about tax rate. So the tax rate are so soft on the top rich people. Therefore, you find this huge inequality which is pervading. In fact, if you read Thomas Piketty's book, you'll find that he had said that if you increase the tax rate of the super rich to about 40%, the percentage of people who would be having 20% would be having, will come down to 50%. And the poor would really be much better off. They would be having all the basic requirements of life. So tax can be a very, very great enabler, can be a great social equalizer. Apart from economic equalizer, it can be a great social equalizer. But I think this particular sample glass is a telltale evidence that how global inequality festers mankind. And it's a very unfortunate thing which is happening. Now I come to the sustainable cities, which is, I now come to the sustainable part of it. Now goal 11 talks about sustainable cities. And you'll find that the city which is doing extremely well, one is of course Punjab. Now see here, we have taken 3 parameters. I think all of you please pay a little attention to this. Now having a good drainage facility. Now you find that in Orissa, the percentage of houses which are connected to a proper drainage facility is just about 66%. Whereas it is around 93% in Gujarat, 97% in Punjab, and about 86% in Tamil Nadu. So very elementary, because we don't have a problem with our own drain, except when it is choked and you have to call a plumber. We do not realize this fact that close to 35% of the households in Orissa do not have a drainage facility. Even Kerala, the city which prides itself for its cleanliness, 25% of the households do not have a proper drainage facility. Waste collection, Orissa has the best record, 100%. So is Gujarat. Kerala is not particularly great, but all other states is this good. Sewage treatment, this is something which bothers me no end. You find that sewage treatment in Kerala, I mean, I think Karthik, it is so revealing, and it hits you in the face. 5%, they do not have proper sewage treatment plants. 4%, whereas it is around 29% in Orissa, 56% in Gujarat, and Punjab leads the way with 88%. Now, the point which I'm trying to say, that when we are talking of sustainable cities, we are actually not talking of smart cities. We are talking of cities, whether they have proper drainage facility, proper treatment for sewage, and proper waste collection facility. Ma'am, I thought I'll just mention to you, in 2012, I had gone to Vienna. 2002, this was my last visit abroad before I retired. So as we're going outside the city, I found a huge plant. So I asked the cabbie, I said, what is this plant? He said, sir, this is the sewage treatment plant. And the entire garbage of Vienna comes here. And this generates 50% of electricity of Vienna. Compare this to a city like Bombay. You have seen a lot of cities where, you have mounds and mounds of sewage, and there is a debate how it is to be collected, how it is to be properly disposed of. But I think this data very, very clearly shows that when we talk of sustainable cities, we are not talking of smart cities, which have good connectivity, roads and all. Beyond connectivity, good for fiber network connectivity, I think you require a good drainage and sewerage facility. I come to another very, very important aspect, which is responsible consumption. The wonderful thing about this report by Niti Aayog has been it's a very, very detailed application to the parameters. Like, for instance, you find that when it comes to hazardous waste, just see hazardous waste, you find that it is quite high in case of say you take Gujarat, you find that the percentage of hazardous waste is quite high. Percentage of fertilizer use is also very, very high. Plastic waste, for instance, is also quite high. So therefore, so when we are talking of responsible consumption, we have to see how much fertilizer we use, how much of hazardous waste we are generating, plastic waste we are generating. Now, one of the wonderful things about the SDG report, that for the first time, it has two goals, which looks at life below water and life on water. So I think there is a need for looking at these two very, very new goals, which SDG has set it for itself. Now, as far as life below water is concerned, there are only 9 states in India which are involved. These are the coastal states. So therefore, the report has confined itself to just 9 states. Now, so there what it has done, it is looking at the water quality at the coast, and what is the area under mangroves, and what is the average marine acidity. These are the 3 very important aspects that it has taken into account. And you'll find that Orissa has a score of 82. Orissa has a very, very high score of 82 as against Gujarat and Kerala, where it is only 57 and 53. And that is largely because the percentage, the quality of water, coastal water quality is far, far better in India. It's around 60, or in Orissa, around 65%, as against just about 25%. So I think it's a very, very wonderful report. I think each student should identify, my request to you, ma'am, would be that instead of every student looking at each of the targets, you could divide the students into different groups. Some can look at the economic target, some can look at the social target, some can look at the environmental targets, and then do an in-depth research. They can write a paper on all this, and that would be really wonderful. Life on land, again, very two interesting parameter, very interesting parameter. One, of course, is how much of forest and tea cover you have. You find that Kerala, it is around 62%. It is naturally endowed with a lot of greenery, whereas it in Gujarat is around 11%. It would be unfair to compare Kerala with the Gujarat. Orissa has about 36%. We have a good forest and tea coverage. Now, what is disquieting to me, Karthik, as a student, you must take note of this. Percentage of degraded land which cannot be cultivated, is as high as, ma'am, 38% in Orissa, as against 7% in Kerala and just 3% in Punjab. This is a very, very important statistics. All of you must kindly keep a note. Punjab, the percentage of land which is not arable, which is completely fallow, which is completely degraded, is only 3%. After Green Revolution, close to 97% of Punjab's land has assured irrigation. Whereas in case of Orissa, it is just about 30%. Many people tell me that, the per capita output of wheat is twice as much in Punjab compared to Orissa, or of rice. So I said, no, Punjab, it is not because Punjabis are 2 times better than the Orias. It is largely because the irrigation support to the arable land is as high as 97%. And whereas in case of Orissa, it is touch below 30%. And the very fact that almost 38% of the land is not arable, degraded, also accentuates the problem. So these are very, very interesting issues to grapple with. So friends, I think I have covered quite a few interesting goals and brought out the interstate differences. Having said all that, let me now come to the follow-up action that is required. What needs to be done. Now, before I come to the latest Paris report, the IPCC report, let me first come to the most defining report that I can think of, which is called the Stern report. Stern was a British economist, and in 2006, he brought out a 690-page report on climate change. It's a wonderful work. I have gone through quite a bit of this particular report. He starts by saying that the climate change that we are going through is the biggest failure of the market. Yesterday, ma'am, I mentioned what Stiglitz said. The financial crisis happened because the free market economy was not regulated. I mentioned about Sandel, who said that since everything is considered to have a price in a market economy, there is no moral element to the society. Now, it is Stern who said that because we do not control our environment properly, because the market is only interested in making profit. If you remember, ma'am, Karl Marx said that profit, thy name is Moses, thy name is God. In a capitalist economy, so profit, thy name is Moses, thy name is God. Therefore, one of the biggest failure of the market is not only greed, but also environmental degradation. And it was Stern who for the first time said there has to be an environmental tax to minimize this economic disruption, environmental disruption. And he was the first to calculate that the overall cost of climate change is around 5% of the world GDP. World GDP at that time was about around $60 trillion. And Stern said that the cost of environmental damage is around 5%. And he said that if you earmark 1% of your global GDP, that will avoid the worst possible environmental disaster that you're looking at. Subsequently, he revised it to about 2%. So essentially what Stern was looking at was just about $1 trillion out of $66 trillion. He said, please commit about 0.6. And he was the one who mooted the concept of carbon tax and trading, carbon trading. Carbon trading means that if you are able to keep your environmental pollution to a particular limit, then if you are able to do better than that, you can trade that with someone who is not able to fulfill the target. So these were the two concepts. Now, very interestingly, in 2018, the Nobel Prize was awarded to an economist, Stern. Stern and Northus, they won the Nobel Prize in 2018. Now, he was awarded Nobel Prize for his very, very critical assessment of Northus. Northus got the Nobel Prize because of his critical assessment of Stern. Now, he evolved what is known as a dice model. I would request all of you, just Google it, just to understand the model. Now, what he is trying to do, Northus is trying to do, he is basically trying to combine economics, carbon cycle, and climate science, how to arrive at an ideal amount of carbon emission. This is very, very important. I keep on saying that, our discussion in all these subjects has to be interdisciplinary. So Northus got this Nobel Prize because he believed that unless we look at the economic cost, the carbon cycle, and climate science, economics, carbon cycle. So therefore, what he basically, in nutshell, what Northus is trying to say, that the cost of degradation of carbon, the discount rate that you are talking of, he was very critical of Stern that he put only 1.2%. He said the additional carbon emission that we are doing is around 1.2%. So Northus said, sorry, he calculated through the DICE model, it is around 3%. A very, very wonderful work that has been done by Northus. Now let us look into India, how India has done in terms of climate change. Now, in case of India, about 30 to 31% people live in the village, live in the cities. And even today, despite the Ujala program, close to 64%, this is the latest figure, close to 64% of India still do not have clean cooking facility, as against 33% by China and about 38% world average. In the developed countries, it is as low as 5%. In India, it is around as high as 64%. Now, India, I'll come to that because I intend to show the Ujala program, ma'am, so that, it explains how there is a huge gap between our policy pronouncement and actual implementation. I'll try to, it's a very, very well-conceived program, but we'll like to look at it. India is also the chairman of the International Solar Alliance of Solar Resource-Rich Countries. Mr. Modi is the chairman. And India has set a target of 100 gigawatt solar energy out of 170 gigawatt of non-conventional energy, which will include wind, nuclear energy and all. Solar energy accounts for about 100 gigawatt. And I thought I'll just share with you my own experience in Ladakh, which I went in 2010. Now, when I went to Ladakh, I was visiting an army unit, and I found that wherever I went, there was on the road, there is a plaque called Naidu Road. Naidu Road, everywhere, just like, you find any city, you find a Gandhi mark. So you'll find a Naidu Road on every city of Ladakh. So we asked people, who is this Naidu? Then they said he was an area commander here, Lieutenant General Naidu. Now he found, very interesting, he found that the whole of Ladakh, electricity came out of genset. They don't have hydroelectricity. So therefore the whole of Ladakh is a very interesting union territory. It receives plenty of sunshine. It has both a desert and snow. I don't think anywhere in the world you find this kind of a combination. Plenty of sunshine, desert, and a lot of snow. So what Naidu did, he discussed with the Ministry of Non-Conventional Energy, and he started building solar panel for the entire army units. Ladakh, very interestingly, has about 70,000 troops. and about 80,000 civilian population. 70,000 troops and about 80,000 population who live in absolute amity, unlike Srinagar and Kashmir. Very interesting. You compare both the places, Kashmir and Ladakh, you find, so what Naidu did, he bought the solar panels, and after fixing those panels, he found that almost 50% of the requirement of electricity could be met by the solar panels. Seeing this, the civilian population, their councillors and all, approached Naidu, and they also had solar panels. So even within India, you have a wonderful example of a union territory where almost 50% of the energy comes from solar power. I think it's a very, very wonderful story which has not been played out enough on the television. Television has much more interesting things to do, but it doesn't report such a wonderful experience that India is having. Very interestingly, I found a interesting research article which says that most of the people in the industry, particularly organized industry, are not very keen about containing carbon emission. It's a wonderful article I read. Now, the reason for this, most of the industrialists say that our per capita consumption of carbon is quite low compared to global numbers, particularly of US or China. And they also say that if I'm going to spend more and more money on carbon control, on green budgeting, then it will retard growth. So I think this is something. It's a misnomer. I think there is a need for coming out of this mindset. There's another very interesting article I found where it criticizes, very interesting, that in India, as per the SDG, clean drinking water is available to 86% of the population. Karthik, please keep a note of this. This is very interesting. As per the SDG report, India, almost 86% of India has safe drinking water. In a very scathing research article, the author has written that our definition of safe drinking water is completely flawed. In India, they consider that hand pumps, is a safe drinking water. Well is a safe drinking water. So he has done a study and he finds that most of the waterborne diseases that you suffer in most of the areas is because of the hand pumps, the water from the hand pumps. So therefore, unless you treat them properly, they are really not potable. So therefore, our definition of drinking water, needs to be controlled. That needs to be redefined. So that is that. I now come to the IPCC report, which essentially says that it gives a very, very grim picture, where it says that if the temperature goes up by 1.5% degree, then 4% of the habitat will be lost. Several hundred million would have climate-induced problem. Half the globary fishery catch would come down. And so it's a very, very disturbing report. So after this report was out, France has banned all cars, every vehicle using petrol and diesel. And they have embraced a policy of no coal use. In fact, France has been a leader, one of the prime movers in clean energy, in environmental concerns. And very sadly, the previous US president, the day the French president went on this, that we are going to have no coal use and will ban all petrol and diesel, he says that, no, I am not going to respect the Paris Agreement. and he asked the coal miners to dig more coal, and he will give them incentives. So that was a very, very unfortunate move by the US president. One only hopes that with the present President Biden in saddle, this particular thing would be changed. I'm mentioning specifically about the US because US is the biggest, polluter of the environment. And they're also the only country which refuses to pay up. Karthik, just keep a note. When the Stern Committee had made an assessment that the total requirement for containing this global temperature would be about $1 trillion, it had asked US to cough up $30 billion because they had made an assessment that US contributes 1/3 of the global pollution. So the first country which reneged out of this was the United States. So in fact, when we discussed about climate change, environmental discussion, we lose sight of the fact that the global monolith, which is your behemoth, which is your US, doesn't fall in line in all these discussions when it comes to its implementation. It has wonderful academics who will write tomes of paper, they will bag all the Nobel Prizes, but when it comes to coughing up money for environmental protection, the record of US has been unfortunately quite distressing. These are two very interesting photographs I thought I'll show. One is Senator Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is 32 years old. She is all up for a green movement. So she says transition to 100% renewable energy is just not an option. There is no option. So he calls for green market, and she has a lot of traction in the US. And of course, the latest heartthrob, of course, has been Greta Thunberg, 18-year-old girl. So she says that the political leaders are not doing enough. She was nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. She got into some controversy in India because she also dabbled in the farmers' agitation, which I think she should have ideally avoided. But I think it's very interesting to find that a young senator and a young student who also is getting good grades are fighting for a new deal and for what we call as Greta effect. So having said that, I'll spend another 5 minutes on an important program that India has. And I personally consider this to be one of the best programs which was launched by the present Prime Minister. One of the most wonderful programs which was launched. If midday meal program was one of the best programs that was put up by the previous government, it is the Ujala program. Very well conceived, subsidy of 1,600, and it's saying that refill should be paid in 4 installments. So the sad thing is, the report now says that almost 36% of the households are still using firewood and biomass. And one of the reasons, in fact, I went to one house where they have one of the cylinders, poor person. So they said, okay, would you like to have tea? So I said, is it possible to have a cup of tea? And she said, yes, I'll use my gas now. So if you have a guest, a poor woman uses a gas. Otherwise, she uses firewood or cow dung. It's a very sad situation, how they preserve gas for all these purposes. The reason I think why this is happening is, as Vivek Ray, who was the Energy Secretary, says, very interestingly, a very, very good friend of mine, he says, politics is trumping economics. Politics is trumping economics. He says, that's a wonderful scheme. So either you subsidize it fully, make it sustainable. Now, if you are looking at a situation where a poor woman will buy a cylinder spending 600 rupees, I don't think it is affordable. Even if you Say you put a cap, say about 2 to 3 cylinders for each BPL families. You provide for that budget. You provide for that budget. Take out the subsidy which somebody like me is enjoying. Instead of making it voluntary for me, you identify all these rich people. 2% pay income tax, 3%. Please take out their gas subsidy. And for heaven's sake, give it to the. I don't know why Mr. Modi, who is such a wonderful leader, such a powerful leader, is not doing it. It will not cost him anything. But I think this is a very, very big problem when we're using a scheme for political purpose. This is done by the earlier political parties also by waiving farm loans. I think that is not sustainable. But otherwise, I think it's a very, very well-conceived program. I come to the last two slides of my presentation. Now, this is from a wonderful book recently written by Jeffrey Sachs. All of you must buy this book, Ages of Globalization by Jeffrey Sachs. It has just been published. A wonderful, wonderful book. Now, so he says that we have stumbled into the 21st century with a stone-as emotion, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. He is quoting E.O. Wilson, a famous biologist, who says that in the 21st century, we hardly have any emotion for us, each other. Even if you use the mobile phone, we are very, very indifferent towards each other. Medieval institutions, because your institutions are not really accountable. They are still quite fragile, unaccountable. And of course, godlike technology. And one of the things that I mentioned yesterday in the education sector, somebody asked us a question that we have not been able to minimize the digital divide. COVID has actually accentuated. And digitization, is completely income agnostic. It is class agnostic. Whether you are a rich man or a poor man's daughter or a son, you can as effectively use a mobile net as somebody who is much richer than you. I think the list that the government should do is to bridge this digital divide. So that's very, very important. The other thing which Jeffrey mentions in this book is that we have to now move away from whole of government approach to whole of society approach. I started my lecture by saying this. That was actually Jeffrey Sachs. So instead of just lumping it on the government and criticizing them, we have to have a whole of society approach where the government, the private sector, and the civil society work together. He also says that there is a need for greater global partnership. He also believes that there has to be a significant increase in investment. There has to be a significant increase in investment rather than an incremental approach. One of the pitfalls of budgeting, not only in India and most of the other states, is an incremental approach. Incremental approach means you think that the inflation would be about 5% to 6%, say put another 5%, so increase the budget by 10%. So Jeffrey says this is not the correct approach. If you are going to make some definitive dent on climate, you have to invest very substantially. And he finds that the deficiency of investment in the world is as high as $2.5 trillion. And the last thing he mentions is that we need excitement and inspiration. I thought that this is something very, very wonderful. I think this is a story I must share with all of you. He said, John F. Kennedy, in a speech, Karthik, listen to me carefully. John F. Kennedy, in a speech in the Senate in May 1961, said that in 10 years' time, we are going to send our American astronaut onto the moon. I'll take about 10 years. So today I am launching this space mission, show that an American will land up on the moon after 10 years. And he also said I'll be very happy, even if I was not the president at the time, if you can do it faster. I remember as a student in first year science in 1969, when we were having a dinner in FM college, the first man, Neil Armstrong, landed on the moon. And that was 2 years before Kennedy's deadline was. So that's all about inspiration. That's about political leadership. So we all have to be excited about it. It is just not numbers finding faults with each other, some states gloating about their achievement or deriding somebody about their failure. It is this excitement and inspiration that will make SDG a success. I end with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mr. It's really wonderful end that you have made.
So yeah, thank you.
Now we welcome questions from the participants. The research that you have made regarding Ujala, that is also my understanding. In my village also, they do not use the gas because they say, when I say them that why are you after this fuel, they say fuel to maganare miluche, gas ta paisa debaku paduche. So that is exactly the no, even today also, even if they have money, they prefer not to spend the money in that context. They are spending so much on health front, but not in the gas. So is there any questions? Today, I suppose everybody is satisfied. No questions, sir.
No, ma'am, I was a little apprehensive about taking this topic. I hope, at least as a professor of public administration journalism, you have passed me today. Have I got pass marks today or not?
Pass marks, sir. It's an excellent presentation. Pass mark poli kaun kahuchandi.
No, it's a difficult subject. It's a difficult subject. It's a difficult area.
Development, you are an economist, so you know better than me. The development has a political economy aspect.
Absolutely.
So it is not that the leaders do not know what will make Ujala successful, but they will not give everything in an absolute way. They will deliver to the public in bits and pieces, so that the public support, the legitimacy keep on continuing if deliveries are made in bits and pieces. There must be some innovation in development administration, so they don't give it in an absolute sense. So there is one question. There is one.
Ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can I ask a question, ma'am?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Yeah. Ma'am, myself, Onano Devray, I belong to NIFT Kolkata.
Okay.
Sir, I have a question to understand it from you. But before that, being a teacher, the thing, I've just, I got the reference from Professor Gautam Saha yesterday, and I joined a little late. And, the way you deliver the entire thing, it's not about only the content and the numbers, but the kind of your personal attachment and the kind of emotions and the feelings that you are imbibing in these numbers. It's I just borrowed your words. It's wonderful. And the moment, every moment you are coming up with these wonderful slides, and it's coming actually in a very wonderful manner. Basically, I'm a student of physics and studied management, and I don't have much idea about the economics. But then, of late, I have come to the realization that I need to get some understanding about it. So I started exploring it. The very basic books of economics are talking about market efficiency.
Yeah.
And it says that market usually good enough to manage that efficiency and so-called supply and demand matching each other and an equilibrium point. And it ensure overall market surplus, wherein your consumers and producers, both of them enjoying the maximum surplus possible, and which is so-called a market efficiency. So how come, being that equality factor and that, sustainable development factors away, I just want to understand economy as a science. If it talks about ensuring that market efficiency, when you let it work its own way, in a free way without much intervention, why it fails to achieve that efficiency?
One of the basic flaws of traditional economics is that it assumes that everybody is equally placed. This is why we yesterday I mentioned about the trickle down theory. So most of the economists, traditional economists, they used to believe that assuming that everybody is equally placed, so if you have more growth, everybody would equally benefit. But what if you have a system where a large number of people are poor and vulnerable for no fault of theirs, So the market efficiency philosophy, which works on a principle of competition, deprives the poor, the vulnerable, the downtrodden from the purview of getting the fruits of competition. So that is the heart of the problem. So therefore, one of the major necessities of a welfare state is to ensure how you share prosperity, and how, and that cannot be done through market efficiency. Market efficiency is good if, supposing you are trying to award a contract for a national highway. Now you can have a competition there. Market efficiency would be where, the best bidder gets that contract and builds that road. But when you talk of market efficiency in a health sector, now a poor man cannot afford a private health clinic. My own personal assistant, he cannot afford a good high-paying school. So therefore, when you have very, very serious asymmetries in the system, there I think, a sweeping application of market efficiency will actually destroy a large number of very, very vulnerable people. So many economists consider, say supposing we are giving rice at very low rates, at 2 rupees and all. So somebody would say Navin Patnaik is a populist guy. Now, this is the basic flaw in the mind of the elite. One of the biggest concern I have about the elites is their extreme elitist and selfish approach. They keep on cribbing why 10 kg of rice at 2 rupees is being given to a poor slum dweller. So they think that, it is something that is being taken away from him and being given to somebody. That is why, ma'am, if you remember, I saw the Indian Constitution, which very, very clearly says socio-economic justice for all, distributive justice for all, and proper consumption, proper child care. That's the responsibility of a welfare state. So you cannot have a state which allows the market forces to operate for a principle of efficiency, leaving a large number of poor people extremely vulnerable. That is where the state comes. This is where Franklin D. Roosevelt, Ananya, I want to tell you, Franklin D. Roosevelt is considered to be the greatest politician of all times. He pipped Gandhiji to the post. Gandhiji was number 2. Every ballot which is held, Franklin D. Roosevelt stands first, largely because of 2 things. when the economic depression happened, he did not accept the viewpoint of classical economists that I should allow the market economy to function the way it is. He said, let people die. If pandemic has happened, if depression has happened, somebody is unemployed, let him die. He said, no. He introduced the New Deal program, provided employment opportunity to the poor. But the other thing which is far more important for me, because he introduced a slew of social security measures, right to health, right to food stamps, right to shelter. These were built into the US budget. Ma'am, I thought I'll just mention to you in a wonderful book, Alan Greenspan. All of you must read this book, Age of Turbulence. Alan Greenspan was the Federal Reserve Bank governor for 23 years. He served under 5 presidents. So he says that when he went to Richard Nixon, who was a Republican, and he told him that, sir, why are you not reducing the social security spending? Social security spending in US, which is considered to be the biggest capitalist system, is 15%. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 15% of US budget was earmarked for providing people with food, healthcare, and shelter. All unemployed people would be given this as a fundamental right. Now, when Alan Greenspan mentioned it to Nixon, he said, "Sir, you please take away 10% and give it to industrial growth." So he smiled. He said, "I am with Franklin D. Roosevelt. He may be a Democrat, but he is the greatest human president that I have seen." You'll be surprised to know that even Donald Trump, when he entered into the White House, the first portrait he garlanded, put a bouquet, was Franklin D. Roosevelt. And Roosevelt was a Democrat. Are you all getting me? So therefore, 2 things. He provided employment opportunity. He provided social security measures. I was going to the budget of the US last year. Do you know they earmarked 25% of their budget on social security programs? The country which prides itself on the principles of economic efficiency doesn't neglect its poor. Please remember this. 95% of the students in the USA get their education, which is publicly funded. People think college education is privately funded, but not school education. Please remember this. College education is very, very expensive, but school education, it is the remit of the state. So therefore, this whole principle of efficiency, all this is absolute balderdash. You have to consign it to the flames. You have to have an empathetic state which looks at the market mechanism with proper control and with an eye on people who are very, very vulnerable. They will create the market for you. Please remember that when they become economically better off, they will create the market for the rich people. Ma'am, this is something very interesting. Raul Prebys was the first Director General of UNCTAD. Just all of you kindly read the life story of Raul Prebys. He was the first Director General of UNCTAD. He made all heads of the government to agree that they should give away 0.6% of the GDP to the poor people, poor countries. 0.6%. And all countries signed. And 0.3% was also given as the first installment. You know what Raul Prebys had said? He said, you are not doing a charity to the poor people. You are doing a charity to yourself. If you improve education and healthcare in Tanzania, in Odisha, you will create a market for your own goods. They will buy your cell phones, your cars. It is a win-win situation. You combine empathy with profit. Please don't forget that. When Raul Prebys died, 120 heads of the states attended his funeral. So therefore, you don't have to be a don't have to be a Swede or an American or an Indian to straddle the world stage. This whole principle, this whole archaic principles of economic efficiency has to be substituted by a concern, ma'am, for inclusive society, where inclusive society means gender equity, all this host of factors, environmental, safety, all these things. I think, Ananya, have I made myself clear?
Yes, sir. So what I can gather from you that government and society has a role to intervene, and that equity has to be, getting a kind of prominence even at the cost of so-called market efficiency.
Yeah, see, market efficiency means your growth would be more. I look at a situation where the economy grows at 4% and has far higher equity than 9% growth with very high income inequality. Are you getting me?
Sir, sorry to interrupt you. The thing actually I'm feeling a little distracting, the kind of claim they are making that when you achieve the efficiency, you are ensuring well-being for the overall economy and maximum economic well-being for all. This particular claim is a little disturbing.
This is not happening. Yesterday in my lecture, I had mentioned that Robert Solo's theory that a rising tide will lift all the boats doesn't happen. When you have 7% growth, everybody doesn't get 7% benefit. I showed in the income inequality curves, you remember, ma'am? I showed in the inequality curve.
Yes, I've seen it.
How the middle class is getting shrinker, the poor is getting poorer.
Yes.
Now, if efficiency was the thing, then why is inequality increasing?
Yes.
Why the society is getting into more and more criminality, violence? You'll create slums around you, which will plunder your houses. Please be very careful about it. You cannot keep a police state. You cannot say that I'll keep a good armed guard and I'll protect myself. Sorry, I mean, I don't think you are looking at that kind of economy.
Yes, sir. Evidences are saying something different than the claim.
Yeah,
yes.
Completely.
Agree, sir. Yeah. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
You are absolutely correct, sir. In United States, it's a first-hand information. In United States, the public schools are equivalent in terms of facility to the private schools.
Absolutely.
Private schools cannot just boast that they are giving better facilities in United States. And the point that you made, the pandemic has made the rich richer.
Absolutely.
And the poor poorer.
Absolutely.
In hours of crisis, the rich is becoming richer, and the state is just a silent spectator.
Absolutely.
And you just see how the people are dying, and there is the fake medicines are prepared and sold in the market.
Ma'am, can you have any defense of a situation where only 7% of our people are vaccinated, and we are looking at December as the target? You cannot have a more mismanaged system. What kind of efficiency are you looking at? It's a very depressing situation.
That's true. That's true. There is another question that. Dr. Mishra, you want to ask something?
I want to just where sir had left yesterday, and as the progress is on the same thing, I thought that the population pressure, again, coming back to that, we have to first see at the entire population. So in compared to the other big states like Brazil, Russia, US and India, if we compare these 4 states, I think we are at the receiving end in the sense that we are too overpopulated to manage a pandemic. Probably the system is in place, but still our people's behavior and the inputs, that is affecting the general condition. Because if you look at Japan, it is also 4% to 5%, and it is a highly developed country. So how do sir react to a situation that how do we can systematize with the population pressure, because that has to be handled also the other way around.
I cannot agree with you more. I only said in the at the end yesterday
Yes, sir.
that we did not have the kind of coercive measure which was introduced during the emergency. That I don't think is a correct thing to do, because you must not force people on something which is very personal. But I think the government must systematically plan. Family planning has to be done properly. The total, incidentally, sir, I thought I'll just quote this figure, since data is something which fascinates me. The total fertility rate in India is 2.5. Total fertility rate means the number of children for a woman between the age of 15 to 49. 2.3, as against 1.2 by almost 90% of the countries. So the world is moving away. You don't have to be Japan, where you have a large number of elderly people. But this is one target, sir, we are consistently missing. This 2.3. Sorry, 2.5. We are constant. Every time we are saying that we'll come below 2, 1.8, but we are just not able to do that. So I think it has to be a system of incentives. Somebody having more than less than 2 children, maybe we can give scholarship to the children. Some kind of inducement. Encourage people to have smaller families. China did it. So I fully agree there can be no demographic dividend unless you have small size of the family. And more importantly, also you have to be very careful about the health of the mother. I mentioned about the serious health hazards that 50% of your adolescent girls are serving. And on top of it, if she has to mother 3 children, just imagine the condition that she'll be at. So therefore, it has to be approached at multiple levels. Nutrition for the women, social sensitivity, and then encourage women to work. One of the studies, ma'am, I thought I'll just mention to you. One of the studies shows that contrary to the perception that working women do not care about children, the overwhelming evidence in most countries show that they are far more sensitive, far more responsible to the children than the fathers. So therefore, all these arguments that if she goes out work, we'll look out the children, that doesn't really hold water. So but yes, I do agree with your contention that we are overpopulated and we need to contain it. And education certainly is one of the good areas. If you're highly educated and employed, your tendency to have a small family will also be very high. My father had 8 children. I have just a son. So that is that, because both of us work. So I see it for myself.
Sir, as the generation next is being addressed today, they are there. So my point is, just one more addition is that now there is a reaction between those youngsters and the taxpayers that 1 rupee, 2 rupee, that will ultimately how long? Because as you said, there should be sensitivity. Where are the more in the rural areas, even in some urban slums, the rate of growth is higher, population growth. And they're not able, some cases you must have seen which has come, they're not able to uphold the family, and they have 3, 4 children to care for. In COVID time, now this is being revealed. Families are tottering. Both the parents have 3 children to care for. So this tendency of producing more, that has to be rationalized at the base.
Oh, 100%.
So that's awareness, rationalization.
Sir, I personally feel that, if we are able to provide good employment opportunities to people, educate them properly, this should be a long-term solution. Obviously, that's a long-term solution if people are highly educated, skilled, and employed. The tendency to have a lesser number of children would be also there, but how do you do for a large number of people who are poor, impoverished, all these things? So it has to be approached in a different way. Maybe giving them free condoms could be one of the contraceptives, could be one of the ways. Sweden did that. Brazil did that. Ma'am mentioned about Brazil.
Brazil,
So
yes.
Brazil did that. Basle Familia, that the program which they did. So many of the things were done in under the rubric of Basle Familia. So it has to be done through multiple ways, but certainly not coercion. Certainly not coercion.
And there should be an agreement. The policy should be one agreement on all political parties, whoever in power, like Kennedy,
Yeah,
to Eisenhower, all this. They should want
yeah,
the main
yeah,
thing,
yeah.
that mainstay of American diplomacy. Yes.
Yeah.
I think, sir, zero child marriage, early marriage, and effective implementation of right to education
Yeah.
will make a lot of difference. So
Lot of difference.
Yes, we have too many questions right now. One question from Bhagyasri, that is the urban area is witnessing challenges like depleting water resources and waste management, which are creating obstacles for a sustainable city. So will it cause reverse urbanization in near future?
I find that particularly true in the hill stations. You know, you go to the hill stations, you find very, very serious water problems. Very, because they hadn't really catered for that kind of traffic to the hill station. But coming to Bhagyasri's point on the cities, yes, it is a serious issue. It is indeed a serious issue. That's why I showed a slide. We showed, how the water treatment, sewage treatment, connectivity to proper waste disposal. That's a very, very weak area. Yes, we have to look into that. Sustainable cities become very, very difficult. Yeah.
So another question, which is actually the question has been posed by Trisa, second year's master student. She is asking, is there, do you find as an economist, the HDI measurement is correct? If not so, is there any alternative ways by which we can rate the countries or we can measure human development?
I think MDPI is a much better measure. The multi-dimensional poverty index, there is a general agreement. It is a far more potent measure because it takes into account education, health, nutrition, living standard, and your assets. Assets both movable and non-movable. So there are about 20 sub-parameters to this, but these are the 5 major things. I think that's why I showed, if you remember, showed a slide how there is a mismatch between poverty and MDPI. So you are absolutely right. Right to education being properly implemented with a proper thrust on education, affordable healthcare. Dr. Pradeep, I want to mention to you. See what has happened. Lot of healthcare facilities have come up, the private sector, but the basic issue is affordability. So while healthcare is available in the country today, are the poor able to afford it? And that is where the public health system must be significantly improved. And one of the good things I found during this pandemic in Orissa, that some of the city hospital, for instance, capital hospital, the facilities were excellent. The vaccination, they were as good, if not better. I went to LB Prasad. My brother-in-law said that, why don't you come to city for the second jab? I found it was much better. So it can be done. It can be done. But to answer the question that yes, HDI is certainly not one of the, it's a very rudimentary measure. When you are not just looking at the average schooling, life expectancy, and per capita income, you have to look at a larger bundle, which will include also gender inequality. I would very strongly suggest that any measure which takes into account gender inequality, then education, health, nutrition, and living standard should be a good measure. There is a need to combine all this, but most of the economists, they look at it from their own perspective. You know, the activists, the women activists, they would say gender inequality. People like Hars Mandir and all, they will talk about global hunger index, you know. So most of the activism in India, I find is in silos. You know, they are not prepared to look at the other side, you know. As I sometimes very wittily say, that it is a dialogue of the deaf, you know, like madam is agreeing with me, you know, but you know, today in the binary perspective that we have, we are not listening to each other, you know. So that is why I bringing a lot of data to make my point, you know, at the risk of patting my back, because any statement that I make, Pratik sir, I try to see that there is a backup data to support it, you know. Otherwise, most of our arguments become highly ideological, you know. So that is one of the saddest thing, you know. I'm very happy that, you know, you are agreeing with some of the things that I'm saying, but many of my friends, you know, they don't agree. You know, today, even between friends, there is a huge divide, you know. Some people say, no, left is dead. You talk like an old leftist, Jolawala economics. So one of my friends said, how is the Jolawala economics? I said, no, I have left Jola in the JNU. I don't have a new one. So that is that. So there is no dialogue. There is no dialogue. We need to sit together. We need to sit together. This is our problem. It is our combined problem.
The rationality is very important.
Very much.
There is another question. Yeah, there is another question, sir. That question has come from Debasis. He asks, what should Odisha do to achieve SDGs in leaps and bounds? That is what he wants to know.
I think as far as the social indicators are concerned, you know, I think Odisha is doing reasonably well. The social indicators. Where I think Odisha is not doing well are on the economic indicators. Devasis, I want to share with you, about 3 years back, there's a book released by the Chief Minister, Mr. Navin Patnaik, and Prabhu Chawla was interviewing him on the stage after he released the book. So Prabhu Chawla asked him that, what is your contribution to the state of Odisha? So he said, I reduced hunger from almost 55% to 30%. He kept on saying that. And the second thing he says, women empowerment. Quite clearly, these are two areas he has done a lot. But on the economic front, I mean, you are a public administration giant, you know, but on the economic front, I think Odisha needs to really catch up, particularly on industry, infrastructure. We need to do far more. I think we still are not a very preferred destination for business, you know. We hold a lot of conclaves and all, but yeah.
That's true, sir. But another point is also the administrative system needs real reform, even in Odisha.
Yeah.
Doesn't work properly.
No.
We might talk about the 5T and all these things, but the administration is not effective even today.
Ma'am, I will narrate a small incident. You know, I have written that book on, edited that book on the differently abled. You know,
yes.
So she was mentioning to me, Mrs. Mahapatra was mentioning to me. So when I complimented her about the wonderful work that she is doing, so he said, you know, Mr. Mishra, you know, I'm talking of Mrs. Mahapatra, you know, that Swabhiman.
Okay.
So she was telling me that whenever a fund has to be released by the state government, I have to go to the secretariat, you know. A lot of people have to ask a lot of questions. So one day in the wheelchair, you know, about 2 hours, I was going from floor to floor till the Chief Minister saw me, you know, and he said, why are you here? So only because he intervened, that 5 lakh grant was released to her. He said, Mr. Mishra, I must have gone to the secretariat 5 times. And even a person who is on the wills, there's very little sensitivity from the administration. It has been my experience also. The civil servants in Orissa are not particularly sensitive to these issues. And they're not accountable. They live like Maharajas, that's all, use 3-acre land, they're just not accountable. Just not accountable. I'm sorry to say, most of them.
This is the reality actually. And that is why Odisha, only the vision of the chief minister will not solve the problem.
No.
We need to have a work culture.
Yeah.
And even the universities are lacking that.
Yeah.
So if the people do not get, Odisha has a very progressive legislation, Right to Public Service Act, enacted in 2012, but it is yet to be effective in true sense of the term. So that is the administration and economics that you said, these two things. If monitored properly, then Odisha will be different.
Absolutely.
That's a clash between politics and economics always. What they think right, we think wrong, and the other way.
So another question is something related to climate change. That is, carbon offshoring is practiced by countries like United Kingdom. And do you think this is a viable practice? I don't know.
Carbon trading.
She writes carbon offshoring. It's a very scientific term. So if you have...
I do not know this term. I think she was referring to carbon trading, many people, carbon trading, where actually if you are having a pollution level less than the permissible limit, you can trade that with somebody who is exceeding the target, so that, well, I think it's not a very fair thing to do. Once I had a spat with Jairam Ramesh on this. See, he had come to KIT University. So I said, this is a very flawed economics. Now if somebody is emitting more carbon, and he buys the carbon credit for somebody like me who has used it less. So he is buying, he is able to buy environmental degradation with a carbon trading. So supposing the limit is 20 and he is exceeding by 10. So he is able not to be penalized by buying carbon carbon thing.
Carbon space
carbon credit, carbon credit for somebody. So it is a very flawed arrangement. It's again a market economics, which is leading to many industries polluting because they're able to buy carbon credits for somebody else. So I have very strong reservations on this.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, Gautam.
Sir, one thing that if we see the social media, if you see different posts, even in newspaper, there is a, primarily political ideology is driven debates. Some people are telling Kerala is all good and some people are telling Gujarat is all good. So what you have presented is a quite rational thing, analyzing the everything, pros and cons, and told what are the pluses and what are the minuses. What probably we need a coordination or learning each other, each one from one another. That is very important. And that part of, that genre of research in India is missing, or that genre of article is missing, because people are biased with some political ideology and they cannot see the others good. So, if you can write in this direction, more, because, it is required. You have a beautiful pen to write, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, and this maybe this sort of article is required. Suppose, example, if I see Prabhat Patnaik's article, I know what he will write. And if I read Arvind Subramanian's article, I know what he will write. It is predicted. So someone has to be there who can see pros and cons without a political ideological bias. And today's presentation is very good for me. You don't have that prejudice. So if you can write in this direction, that will service.
There is
This
no
is the first question.
ideological.
Yeah.
Baggage, rather.
One of our
Sir,
own.
another question I may.
Yeah,
Yes,
please.
yes, please.
Sir, another question I may, that was if we see the capitalist economy and if we see the Scandinavian countries, and they are doing far better than your traditional in the US or the followers.
Yeah,
What are basic tenets of economy that we want to know, sir? And can India follow in this very typical Indian system? Because we cannot have a revolution to do these things, but at least we can follow the Scandinavian approach gradually. Sir, in this way, if you can enlighten us.
There is a wonderful book on this which compares American democracy with Scandinavian democracy, and
Yes.
this is a book by Sylvia Previs. Sylvia Previs, a wonderful scholar. I think it's almost iconic work comparing between the American economy with the Scandinavian economy. Now, she mentioned, Sylvia Previs mentions that when the financial crisis happened in 2007, 2007-2008. So, so in case of most of the Swedish countries, they held a court of inquiry to find out who were the fall guys, who were responsible for this, who were those unscrupulous elements who were doing this. Whereas in case of America, the whole approach was how to, soft pedal it. On one hand, so when the incentives were to be given in the bank, so Joseph Stiglitz and company, they went on a march to the White House, telling Obama, please, for heaven's sake, don't give incentives to those bankers who have been responsible for the financial crisis. It doesn't happen just like that. So the short point which Sylvia brings out, that in a democracy Sweden, there is an accountability. If somebody has really crippled the system, has created a serious economic inconvenience in the system, which is due to greed, due to malfeasance, there must be a mechanism to bring them to book. Okay. Whereas in the American system, there is a tendency to put them under the carpet. So I think I have explained, Gautam, to you. So basically, how democracy works, it is largely because Sylvia writes, because most of the funding in America is done by these corporates, lobbying, as they say. So therefore, they have a legitimate interest in being soft pedaling, or sometimes even covering up for manifest irregularities with the corporates have done. So system has to be accountable, as the madam said, that governance, one of the main features of governance is that am I accountable? Am I accountable? It cannot be just an incentive-based system. It cannot be protecting a wrongdoer beyond a particular period. You have to get it to the neck. Then I'll just, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
It's a story for Western Odisha. Western Odisha, why there is so much child marriage, the rate of child marriage, percentage of child marriage, the early marriage is so, it's high in Navaranpur or in Malkangiri. It is because, the civil servants or the administration, they are they are not accountable for that. When you have the legislation, why there is so much migration and that migration is not registered properly? So that is the even today, though Odisha is a performing state, but the scenario in Western Odisha says that administration is not effective. That is the thing. That the NFHS data also shows that.
Sir, the book you have mentioned, Sylvia book.
Sylvia Walbes.
Sir, again, please.
Sylvia Walbes. I'll just mail it to Gautam. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Sir, Ananya is NIFT colleague, one of my NIFT colleagues, very interested about economics and very interested to talk to you later.
No, thank you.
Already had a conversation, you know. Thank you.
Thank you. All like you.
All right, sir. Thank you very much.
That speaks wonderful Bengali also.
It's a wonderful session, sir.
Thank you.
And we are really.
Sir, you know, just to add what Madam said, sir, especially online, you are so effectively reaching us. I'm just telling you, being an academician, and I'm really very scared to reach students online, through online. But so effectively you are reaching. And I told yesterday, Gautam, that I just missed some of the hours and just send me the recording of the entire thing. The points and the kind of a zeal and the life that you bring into the entire thing. Amazing,
Mr. Rai, you can listen to Professor Mishra on YouTube. We have our channel Journalism Utkal. So there you can listen to Professor Mishra. We have recorded there.
Ask everybody to be on video, ma'am. Then at least I can see most of you.
Yes, that's what I am going to say now. Now, dear participants, please switch on your video and have a clapping for Professor Mishra, because we enjoyed both the things. So please switch on your video and give a clapping for Professor Mishra, which will be recorded in our YouTube.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's really interesting, sir. Participants, you have to switch on your video and you have to unmute yourself so that the clappings can be recorded. So please unmute yourself. Then only, please unmute, Mr. Roy, please unmute yourself.
So
it's really interesting.
Thank you.
It's really engaging both the sessions, and just sitting at home and working from home, we were really getting tired. So your lectures made us more energetic.
We also thank you for doing all the good work. Thanks to Swarnamay Tripathi also.
Thank you, sir.
Madam, huge organization.
Because sir, because of this pandemic, I missed my headset in an effective way. So I thought before retiring, I thought I must have some contribution to the department as well as to my friends and to my students. So in a marathon way, I have arranged lectures in this month of June.
So this is it. You have done it. This is it.
Academics don't retire.
No, I am not retiring. I mean, I will be retiring from the department. So naturally,
going to retire, EYRE, and engage all of us. Engage all of us.
Retired to resurgent. Retired to resurgent.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, esteemed participants, on behalf of the Department of Public Administration, and our alumni group, because I find so many alumni in this session. I thank you everybody for being with me and for keeping my invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Organized it. Thanks a lot.
Again, on 21st, we are having another symposium on media, social responsibility, and governance. On 21st, you will be again getting the link. So if you have time and if you find the topic interesting, be with us. We have 3 speakers on that day: media, social responsibility, and governance.
Surely.
I'll be reaching to all of you, and also I'll send it to Professor Mishra so that Professor Mishra can circulate among his colleagues and students. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we are ending the meeting. Okay.